I used to think that working the night shift at Church's Texas Chicken was easy money. Boy, was I wrong. The restaurant was an aging behemoth, nestled at the edge of town. Its crimson sign, adorned with a gleaming cross, cast an eerie crimson glow that could be seen from miles away. I'd heard stories about the place, whispers of strange occurrences that only happened after dark. But I needed the cash, so I brushed those tales off as nonsense. Until that fateful night. My first shift started like any other. I slipped into my greasy uniform, clocked in, and took my place behind the counter. The restaurant was empty, save for a couple hunched over a corner booth, their low murmurs mingling with the hum of the fluorescent lights above. I focused on my tasks, scrubbing the fryers and arranging trays of biscuits. Then I heard it. A soft, almost inaudible whisper, like a breath of wind on a stormy night. I glanced around, trying to pinpoint the source. My coworker, Jake, stood a few feet away, his eyes fixed on the sizzling chicken. He didn't seem to have heard a thing. I shook it off, as my imagination playing tricks on me. But as the night wore on, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. It was as if the very walls of the restaurant were trying to tell me something I couldn't quite grasp. Couple in the corner booth had finished their meal and left without a word. That's when things took a turn for the bizarre. The lights above began to flicker, casting erratic shadows on the checkered floor. Jake cursed and grabbed a stepladder to fix the bulbs, leaving me alone at the counter. As he climbed, I noticed the shadows moving in a way that defied logic. They twisted and contorted, forming grotesque shapes on the walls. I stared, my heart pounding, unable to tear my eyes away. Then, in a fleeting moment, the shadows coalesced into a nightmarish figure, a towering creature with elongated limbs and a gaping maw of jagged teeth. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. Jake descended the ladder, oblivious to the horrors I'd witnessed. The light steadied, and the feed vanished as quickly as it had appeared. I tried to tell Jake what I'd seen, but the words died in my throat. He would think I was crazy. That night, the whispers continued and the shadows danced, mocking me. I couldn't concentrate on my work, couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. When the clock finally struck midnight, I practically sprinted for the door, leaving Jake to finish closing up. The following night, I reluctantly returned for my shift, hoping the previous night had been a bizarre one-time occurrence. But as soon as I stepped inside, I knew I was wrong. The restaurant was empty, but the air was heavy with an oppressive silence. As the hours passed, the whispers returned, louder and more urgent. I couldn't make out the words, but they filled me with an overwhelming sense of dread. I glanced at Jake, who was busy preparing chicken, oblivious to my distress. Then, the lights began to flicker again, and the shadows moved with a sinister purpose. This time, they formed a grotesque tableau of suffering and torment. I watched in horror as a shadowy figure, its face contorted in agony, reached out toward me. I backed away, my heart pounding, my mind racing. I had to get out of there. But before I could make my escape, the figure lunged at me, its shadowy fingers brushing against my skin like a cold, clammy hand. I screamed and stumbled backward, crashing into a stack of trays. Jake rushed over, concern etched on his face. What the hell happened? I couldn't find the words to explain. I just knew I had to leave that place, and I had to leave it now. I quit on the spot, ignoring Jake's protests, and practically ran out the door. For days, I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom that had settled over me. The restaurant haunted my dreams, the whispers and shadows seeping into my subconscious. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't escape the relentless terror that had taken hold of me. Desperate for answers, I did some research on Church's Texas chicken. What I found sent shivers down my spine. The restaurant had a dark history, a string of bizarre incidents that had occurred over the years. People had reported strange visions, unexplained phenomena, and a pervasive sense of dread while inside. Some claimed to have seen shadowy figures lurking in the corners just as I had. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had experienced, and I knew I had to go back. It was foolish, I knew, but I needed to confront whatever malevolent force lurked within that place. I convinced Jake to accompany me, though he remained skeptical. As we entered the restaurant, the familiar crimson glow of the sign greeted us. The place was empty, as it had been on those fateful nights. The whispers began almost immediately, a chorus of eerie voices that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. I led Jake to the spot where I'd seen the shadowy figure, and as I pointed, the lights above us flickered. The shadows coalesced once more, forming a grotesque tableau of suffering. But this time, there was something different about it. It wasn't just a random assortment of shapes. It was a message, a warning. Leave, the shadows spelled out, their dark forms shifting to form the word. I turned to Jake, my voice trembling. We have to go, now. But before we could make our escape, the shadows moved again, this time spelling out a name I recognized all too well. It was Jake's name. He froze, his face turning white as a sheet. The shadows seemed to reach for him, their inky fingers closing in. I grabbed his arm and pulled him away, but it was too late. The shadows enveloped him, and he let out a blood-curdling scream that chilled me to the bone. I ran, the screams echoing in my ears, the whispers growing louder and more malevolent. I didn't look back, didn't stop until I was far away from that accursed place. I never saw Jake again. The police investigated his disappearance, but they found nothing. The restaurant remained open, its crimson sign casting an eerie glow over the town. But I knew the truth, knew that something dark and sinister lurked within its walls. I moved away, far from that town, far from the memories that haunted my every waking moment. But I couldn't escape the feeling that the darkness of Church's Texas chicken would follow me wherever I went, a constant reminder of the horrors I had witnessed. To this day, I can still hear the whispers in the night, still see the shadows moving in the corners of my vision. And I know that, somewhere in that restaurant, Jake's tortured soul still lingers, trapped in a never-ending nightmare.